Good evening. Good evening. Nag-isip tayo ng opening line. Nag-ayan na tayo kahapon. So ngayon naman, good evening. Tagalog ba? Or English? Ayan, guys. Okay. Dami natin pag-usapan in 10 years of my journalism. Marami pong nagagalit sa atin, sa ating production, from liberal side, from Republican side, Democrat side. But katulad nga sinabi ni Idol Bitag, dapat po ano tayo, agnostic po tayo. Dahil po ang ginagawa po natin dito is community service. Community service dahil hindi pa tayo nag-public service. Alright, okay, ito guys. Puya ka siya. Ang tagal din kasi yung interview kay Congressman Zia kanina. Alam ko siguro yung mga ibang vloggers, back to reality na naman sila. Quadcom pinag-usapan kasi as we speak, tuloy-tuloy na naman ang usapin Quadcom, investigations, yung mga envelopes sa DepEd. Medyo umiinit na itong discussion ukol sa potential impeachment of Sara Duterte. Although, at least a couple of Congressman Zia a while ago dun sa isang interview, bago ka ako pumasok sa studio, siya yung interview, was adamant that premature pa to talk about impeachment. Although, of course, as we speak, medyo we're weeks into some of folks in the Congress openly saying that there could be grounds for filing of articles of impeachment laban kay Sara Duterte. And in that context, also pinag-usapan natin yung the non-impeachment track to prevent Sara Duterte from running in 2020. That's the issue I want to go back to. But unang-una, let me immediately strike down 2 points that I keep on seeing being raised. Una-una dun sa mga kamaga natin, kamaga, hindi na kamala, kamaga, yung mga kamaga natin, dami nagalit na naman sa akin. How dare you compare our blonde, beautiful Donald Trump to Tatay Digong? Yan. How dare you compare and say Trump and Digong are similar? Yan. Pa, marami pa ako tayong nakita. How dare you? You're not in the US. You're not from here. You do not understand the context. How dare you compare? Yan na naman tayo. So, una-una, let me address that question. Essentially, comparative politics, functional analysis 101. Right? Bago tayo pumunta sa isang, sa aking palagay, even more contentious issue. Alright? Sa isang more contentious issue, na tinitroll na tayo, hindi pa nga tayo nagsimula, relax lang kayo dyan. More contentious issue, no? On the other side, may pinost din tayo kanina about voter blaming. Alam na natin saan papuntang discussion. And then, idikit natin ito dun sa 2028, makabalik ba ang mga Duterte? So, you can see, tinikit ko sa lahat ng issue na yan. May arc po lahat ng arguments natin. So, kung hindi kayo nakakahabol sa logic ng sinasabi natin, hindi ko na problema yan. But, balikan natin ito mga to, guys. Unang-una, does it make sense to put Donald Trump and Duterte in the same category? Yes, if you understand what is populism. Ano bang definition of populism? Right? A charismatic leader who tries to put himself above the constitutional order in the name of representing the so-called the people. In short, anti-establishment, charismatic. And then the next question is, what kind of populist? Right-wing or left-wing? If left-wing, well, more focus is on progressive social-cultural values, pro-immigration, pro-minority rights, etc. etc. Pag right-wing naman, more about preservation, traditional values, family values, etc. So, kung ginamit niyo yung utak nyo, kitang-kita nyo where Donald Trump checks or ticks all the boxes and where Duterte also ticks on all the boxes. So when you make comparative analysis, you're not gonna say, oh, but Narendra Modi, he looks like this. Oh, but Biden looks like that. Oh, Digong looks like this. Oh, Erdogan looks like that. Oh, this guy has this religion, that guy has that religion. That's not how you make analysis, guys. You look at functional factors. And then you look at the political spectrum. Saan ba siya? Now, speaking of the political spectrum, alam ko there's also some debate there. Because yung mga familiar sa populismo sa konteksto ng Latin America, for instance. If you talk about Peronismo, right? Juan Peron, or the the conjugal populist slash dictatorship, whatever you want to call it, that happened in Argentina almost 100 years ago. If you look at that context, hybrid siya. Because in the case of Juan Peron, he was extremely popular with labor unions, so medyo leftist, but at the same time he came from military background and he relied on the support of the military. So there are some scholars who say na yung left-right distinctions na pinag-usapan based on the French Revolution experience, di ba? Saan galing left and right? Yung mga left na nakaupo doon sa National Assembly, sa fronts, sila yung revolutionaries, sila yung anti-monarchists, yung mga nasa right, sila yung conservationists, monarchists, loyalists. So yun yung pinanggalingan itong term na right-wing, left-wing, etc. So some people talk about the meaninglessness of right versus left when you talk about global south, developing countries, and the Peron example is almost raised. Having said that though, it is absolutely true. Now, whether it's Trump, whether it's Duterte, whether it's Erdogan, whether it's Modi, even Bolsonaro, I can go on and on about this, whether Victor Orban, that they say certain things that hits both left and right. So for instance, pagdating kay Digong, he says, I'm a socialist. Alam natin he used to have good relationship with quote-unquote communist. So does that make him leftist? With Donald Trump, for instance, or if not Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, for instance, he talks a lot about anti-corporations. He talks about jobs, Rust Belts, coal and steel. Well, Trump also talks about those things. He calls himself, essentially, a blue-collar billionaire. Now, yeah, that sounds leftist, but it's actually not left. Because if you functionally look at what really Trump's policies represent, tax breaks on the billionaires, not a fundamental change doon sa structures of class in America. If you look at why oligarchs or big tech bros, whether it's Thiel and Elon Musk, and sino pa yung isa pang from South Africa guy, is it Sachs, a lot of people love Trump because they know he's for deregulation and not only tax breaks, which is great for the billionaires and the great guys and all of that. So, if you really look at it closely, Trump and Duterte both clearly meet the definition of populism and arguably both easily also meet the definition of a right-wing populist. Now, some would go as far as saying, oh, yung isa fascist, yung isa alt-right, whatever, but I won't go that far, at least in this vlog. Separately, diniscuss natin what is fascism, your fascism, proto-fascism, new fascism. Mahabang usapan yan. And it's a very loaded term. It's a very loaded term. And of course, inaabuso din yan because, and I'll talk about this a little bit more, because the term fascism is also used sometimes to dismiss whole countries and people. And I don't like that. Because whether it's the 16 million who voted for Duterte or the 72 million people who voted for Trump, or 75 siguro by the time all the votes are counted, Arizona, whatever. That 71 million are people who voted for Trump for many reasons, not for one reason or other. Some people had legitimate considerations like immigration. Some people had conservative Catholic values. They couldn't fathom voting for a candidate who was for abortion. There are people who felt U.S. is not strong on foreign policy, that we have to end the Ukraine war. So actually, kung kinausap niyo yung mga tao na sumusuporta kay Donald Trump, marami silang mga dahilan, which explains why a lot of people from even minority groups or moderate background or even a bit liberal leaning or independent leaning or even progressive leaning, some of them, at the very least, didn't want to vote for Harris. Right? And then alam pa natin dun sa sa pinakamalaki na Muslim majority city in America, nanalo pa si Trump. We know there's in Miami County, a place where Hillary Clinton won by 30 points. Trump flipped that with 15, 16 points. So a 40 points reversal for the Democrats. In Texas, for instance, in one of the major Latino majority cities, which Obama won by 80 points, Trump was able to win it. So huge reversal. So hindi mo pwede sabihin na lahat yan bumoto dahil sa X, Y, and Z lang. It's really a combination of factors. Most importantly, anti-incumbency. And kaya sabi ko, ang pinakamali ni Kamala Harris was essentially yung tawag ko dyan, the Marojas dilemma, right? Are you willing to openly criticize or distance yourself from the very outgoing president that put you in that position? Yes, you have to do that. And when you don't do that, you end up taking all of the claim. And speaking of that, kakalabas na kanina, this is very important. I don't know if you guys watched it, this interview on The View. And I think this is where one of the biggest mistakes of Kamala Harris also emanates. She did not distance herself enough from a very unpopular incumbent in an era of anti-incumbency. So this is the important.
And I've been a part of, if anything, would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years? there is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact. Yeah. Listen, I plan on having a Republican in my cabinet. You asked me. List. Yes, right. You asked me what's the difference between.
I mean, no, that's not the right thing to do. The right thing to do was to say, I've been part of the Biden administration, yes, but he's at the end of the day, he's the president. He had the final say on certain issues. And yes, if I become the president, with all due respect, on certain issues, maybe there'll be a slight adjustments. Maybe I'll take a different position. I will revisit, at least pwede nga sabihin, i-revisit ko yung issue ng economy, inflation, immigration, foreign policy. Hindi. Ang sinabi niya, no, there's not a single thing I can. Mali. That's not gonna work in an anti-incumbency. And yes, one reason why I felt her team thought they could get away with that is because in 2022, the Democrats were able to completely defy all expectations na magkakaroon ng all-out red wave, and hindi nangyari because they were very effective in mobilizing the women vote, the suburban vote, the college-educated women vote, against the MAGA candidates. But this time, this is already a presidential cycle, and it's a very anti-incumbency presidential cycle. So I just felt that was a mistake. But going back to this, don't take it personal. It's not about whether magkamukha sila or hindi. It's about the type of politics they represent. Kaya minsan, sabi ko, interesting na may mga kilala tayo na pro-Trump and then pro-Lenny rin. Ang dami kong nakitang ganyan. On the record, off the record, ang dami kong nakita. Anonymous, not so anonymous. And I just feel it's precisely because people are not really paying attention in terms of saan ba papasok itong candidate na to in terms of classification and all. And I cannot blame people because practically most people don't think in those terms. It's a very kind of a political science academic way. It's not work, by the way. It's an academic literature. It's a matrix typology. You know how like biologists approach classifications in nature, etc. So yeah, so please don't give me this nonsense about, oh, you don't know this. Actually, you talk to any serious scholar, whether it's in Harvard Law School, whether it's in Stanford, whether it's in Europe, whether it's in Australia, whatever, and you ask one-on-one about populism, tick all the boxes, both Trump and Duterte. Now, I also find it interesting that, a lot of our MAGA friends, Kamaga friends, who were talking about election steal and all of that in 2020, suddenly now they're not saying anything. But actually, this time, the Democrats are in power. So if they were really into the business of stealing and bringing in boxes of votes, why didn't they do it this time? Because actually, the popular vote splits 47 to 51. And importantly, in a couple of Rust Belts, the difference is just tens of thousands. So, anyways, whatever. Okay. So I'm just saying that's also part of populism. Coming up with narratives that defy facts and reality. Conspiracy theories. Oh, the deep state is after me and all of that, whatever. But that's it. It's part of the anti-establishment thing. So Duterte would talk about oligarchs, Dilawan, America, essentially, and Trump would talk about a globalist elite, a deep state. All of them are speaking similar terms, conspiratorial terms. In the case of Modi, because of his Hindu nationalist orientation, there's also even a religious tinge to some of the conspiracy theories. I mean, if you understand the whole Pakistan-India dynamics, etc., you know exactly what I'm talking about. Bolsonaro, Orban, I can go on and on about this. In fact, Viktor Orban of Hungary, is very much that guy in terms of, oh, there's a globalist conspiracy, George Soros is behind every mga ganyan rhetoric, right? Conspiratory theory. So, that's the first thing I want to strike down. If you want to get to know more about it, I can give you a million, studies out there that you can read and educate yourself on. All right, in terms of why ginagamit itong term na populism, typology, classification, etc. Okay, clear. Now if ayaw mo pa rin makinig, problema mo na yan. But just please don't project your on me. Pangalawa, and I think this is the more important one. Kanina pinost natin yan. So kanina nakita ko na naman, ito na naman, very, very, as expected, we saw the usual suspects coming out and making this broad, brush strokes judgment about whole class of people, diba? Ayan na naman, yung voter blaming. The whole voter blaming, body of, literature is out again. Very, very expected. So kanina, ito nakita natin to, diba? Ayan, itong tao na to. Itong mga tao na to na umatak sa akin for a while pa itong mga to. Galit na. Ito na naman. O, basahin nyo na. Tanggapin ko naman na ganito tayo para, pero mas ganito ang mga voters sa Amerika. Yung mga ganon type. So essentially, demonizing, insulting all the voters. And now saying, kaya ang US bumoto kay Trump at dito sa Philippines kay BBM or Duterte dahil ganyan. No. That's wrong. That's wrong on many levels. Now, I got a comment kanina about, like someone said, yeah, Richard, okay, I know where you're coming from, but you have to understand what people feel frustrated, ganito, ganyan. Like, okay, yeah, of course I understand. You think I'm happy to see a certain type of people, which in my, whom in my opinion have no business even running for office or, having their fingers on a nuclear bottom or deciding the fate of things. Of course I have my frustrations with the political system. And not only here and there, but all across the world. Sure. I have some very clear ideas about where things should go. What is the right direction for this country? Sure. Absolutely, 100%. But, una-una, compassion is very understanding. So if you read The Great Gatsby, opening chapter pa lang, there's a line there, very important line there, where the narrator says that it was played by that Spider-Man guy doon sa movie ng Gatsby with Leonardo DiCaprio. He said something like, my father told me to always keep in mind that not everyone got the kind of education you got. I think in this case, Princeton, if not Yale, or something like that. So, first of all, I think you have to have compassion because marami sa ating mga kababayan or marami sa mga tao all around the world, they live in different information ecosystem. And a reflection, and that ecosystem sometimes is also a reflection of class. Or some people are so busy just trying to survive every day na wala silang oras na umupo ng 3-4 oras at magbasa ng mga news. Hindi rin libre magbasa ng mga news sa New York Times or Washington Post. You need subscription, whatever. So there are many filters and layers that ensure that not all of us have similar information ecosystem, not to mention similar exposure to quality information and analysis or training. In the same way na hindi ko naman sisisi yung mga kaibigan natin kung walang background or understanding of what is comparative politics. How is classification made? Why is this populist? Why is not this populist? What is right-wing? What is left-wing? What is hybrid? Yes, kaya nga in-explain ko. Dahil hindi naman kasalanan yung iba. In the same way, hindi ko naman kasalanan kung hindi ko maintindihan yung latest iterations in string theory and physics. Right? Blah, blah, blah. Right? Or computational mathematics, certain new theories. Hindi ko kasalanan, hindi ko naintindihan. So, I expect someone who knows better than me to explain it to me nicely. Yeah. That's part of compassion. That none of us will be 100% knowledgeable in all important issues, including in politics. And we don't live in this. So, compassion is very important. Pangalawa, and with that compassion goes the moral question. Tama ba na i-demonize mo or bastusin mo yung ibang voters dahil lang iba yung pananaw nila sa buhay? Now, I saw, some people there was say, "Oh, Richard, but like, excuse me. First of all, you put yourself in my shoes, getting hundreds of horrible attacks and insults here and there. Actually, I'm a very patient and cool guy considering that. And then if I call you troll or something, asaran yan. Inaasar niyo ako, I asar you. I give as good as I get. Be sport. Don't be a crybaby, because I'm not a crybaby. I'm here. I'm talking to you guys. I'm taking your punches. And once in a while, I'm punch back. So what? Be a sport. Right? Huwag kang umiyak. Right? Oh, but Richard, you said I'm a troller. You go all around and say, okay lang patayin yung mga ordinary, you go around and saying all these horrible things about people in media, etc. You insult me and all. And then I call you troll suddenly. Oh, you're gonna get out of here, man. Get out of here. All right? So please lang. At if you cannot take asar or, get out of here. Okay? So, you always know, for all criticisms I make of certain politicians, etc., I always say, do not judge the entire people of Davao for the Dutertes. The same way, do not judge all of us Ilocanos for what Marcoses do. The same way, you do not judge all the Filipino people for, I don't know, what Joseph Estrada or Arroyo did as president. You don't do those things. And this is all part of not only compassion, but also grounded and contextualized analysis. And it's very possible na sa isang election, may binoto ka dahil may mali kang assumptions or it was a gamble, and then later you regret it. Then great, good. At least may realization. Or minsan naiya ka, mayabang ka, yung mga aminin na kamali ka, sige pilitin mo pa. So, that's also why it's wrong to to insult all of these voters. And it's factually also wrong because I explained a while ago. Like, for instance, people who voted for Trump had a million reasons to vote for Trump, including inis sila sa Biden administration. For Gaza policy, for the inflation issue, although less kasalanan ni Biden yan because more indirect structural economic effects yan, pero mahabang usapan yan. Or some of the woke stuff supposedly na hindi tugma dun sa kanilang social values. Kasalanan ba ng tao na to na conservative siya? In fact, there's a whole body of work on how different people have different psychological and physiological attributes that gives them a certain temperament and bias. In fact, there's a neuroscience study of why certain people with certain attributes will tend to be more conservative than not or more liberal than not. So openness to change and uncertainty, if your brain structure, your temperament is that, then you can be more liberal. If you're a little bit more fearful of certainty, if you're a little bit more fearful of change, then you tend to be more conservative. So there are many factors that explain that. So sasabihin mo lang undereducated sila or something. I'm not very sure about that. But actually, going back to the issue of compassion, we also have to accept, I absolutely agree, that we have a problem, not only in the Philippines or US, whatever. We have a problem with critical thinking in terms of whether there's enough critical thinking in politics base dun sa quality ng education natin. May sapat bang kalidad yung ating education system to ensure that all of us have sufficient critical thinking when it comes to making major political decision. All right? So, diba? So, in that sense, if you have criticism about people not making the most educated guess, then go and criticize the education system. Then do something about the education system. Then go and propose something about how to improve the curriculum and improve our education system. So don't vote the person, don't judge the person, criticize the system that doesn't create enough people or doesn't create enough critical thinking among folks, right? Na hindi naman kailangan na pumunta ka sa best elite schools para magkaroon ka ng sapat na critical thinking, blah, 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 right? So, that's how you should approach it. But lastly, and this is very, very important, politically, when you insult other voters openly and say, oh, all of them can get, you're actually not helping your case. In fact, ang daming tao dyan, alright, let me be absolutely clear. I understand. May minsan, ako rin, kung ano nang sinasabi ko, out of anger, or minsan nangasar ko at sumablay. Yeah, I get it. But, ang dami ko napansin na hindi ito isolated case. Hindi ito yung nabwisit lang siya, may sinabi siya, or na-hurt lang. May mga tao talaga na pinipilit talaga nila, na ang argument lang nila, natalo sila dahil lang ganito. Dahil lang may problema doon sa mga voters. And this is very fascinating because I saw exactly a tweet along those lines yesterday by some of the liberals. Again, this is a subsection. This is a very small group. I'm not saying that all liberals are like this. Ayoko rin bag tini-twisting words ko. I never said all liberals are like that. But there's definitely this strain in whether opposition there, opposition here, Democrat, na parang kung hindi nangyari yung gusto namin mangyari sa elections, ang problema hindi sa amin, ang problema ay nasa voters. So for instance, this guy, Michael Stern, got a lot of backlash online over the past 48 hours. Nag-commenting ako, sabi na CNN has a story called Where the Harris Campaign Went Wrong. He said, nope, I won't read it. Harris ran a great campaign. The story should be titled Where the American People Went Wrong. It's like, yeah, again, we can have an argument about, yeah, sana, yeah, sana may red line tayo kung ito kay convicted, ganyan. I get it, but the problem with that kind of approach is, practically speaking, it has two problems. One is, when you say this openly, mas lalo na alienate yung ibang voters na you could have won to your side. But more importantly even, is this, hindi ka magkakaroon ng sapat na self-reflection to look at anong mga naging mali mo sa campaign strategy mo. Because if you're gonna say everything is just disinformation, if you're gonna say everything is all wrong with voters, edi wala na, uwi na tayo, tapos na, sara na natin yung tapos na, nanalo na. O, bakit pa tayo nandito? Diba? So, hindi ka na magkakaroon ng self-reflection, postmortem, etc. I'll tell you what, I won't be surprised in 6 months to 1 year from now, the Democratic Party of the US will release a postmortem of where they went wrong. Now, kamusta yung mga ibang opposition? Ilang taon na? Meron ba silang postmortem? What went wrong in 2016, 2022, etc.? And that's exactly where they're coming from. Because you have to have that so that you learn your lesson. It's interesting, in 2012, nung natalo si Romney, nagkaroon ng postmortem analysis ng Republican Party. And they said, and you can read it on your own, na isa sa pinakamalaking problema ng Republican Party is they're not making inroads into minority groups. That if Republican Party doesn't win over Latinos, Asian Americans, etc., they're not going to be competitive in presidential race. And the last time an American Republican presidential candidate was able to win a popular vote, the popular vote was in 2004, 20 years ago. 20 years ago. And by the way, Biden had more popular vote than Trump this time. So the strategy was we have to do something to win over the minorities. Little did they know it will be in the person of Trump, which was the last thing you would have thought, considering he talked about build the wall and all the horrible things he said about Mexicans and all of that. But in the end, Trump being a showman, Trump knowing about electoral strategy, about understanding something about people, getting the right people around him, getting the right messaging out, and also tapping into grievances of people, economic grievances. He was able to make that change. In fact, ang usapan ngayon is, did Donald Trump create a complete realignment of the American electoral map? The last time we supposedly had that, not even under Reagan, not even under Obama. Apparently, the last time we were supposed to have that was, you can go as far back as FDR in the interwar period up to Second World War, or you can say when we were talking about the 60s and 70s cultural war, when Nixon had the Southern strategy or something like that. So, in a way, Trump effectuated yung resulta ng yung mga conclusions nila dun sa weaknesses ng Republican Party. So this Republican Party is totally different. This is a MAGA Trump party, which is an anti-establishment conservative party. We have never had anything like that. For a long time, the Republican Party was the party of business class, evangelist people, very traditionalist. This one is, yes, evangelical, yes, a bit conservative, but also anti-establishment and pro-industrial policy and pro-workers. Boom. He completely... So, I'm not sure that Trump read that, but I'll tell you what. The reason why many Republicans supported Trump is precisely because they saw that postmortem and said, wait. It looks like this guy is solving our problem. So you keep on hearing this narrative na Trump is a flawed vessel for the right message. And he proved himself big time, not necessarily in 2016. In 2020, he actually lost. I mean, come on. But 2024, he proved that he's capable of creating this realignment. And now let's go to the last part of our discussion very quickly, right? So bakit ko sinasabi yan? See, everything is logically connected to each other. I'm building out this argument. So, simple lang naman ang implication sa Philippines. The opposition has to have proper postmortem. They have to find the right people to plug in the gaps, work on the areas where they have weaknesses, and third, most importantly, the parallel to what happened yesterday is Duterte's coming back in 2028. Because in 2022 and 2023, sabi ng lahat, tapos na si Donald Trump. It's over. Republicans are sick and tired of him. He's a pariah after the January 6th event, whatever. And then unti-unti was able to build himself back. And unti-unti was able to leverage his MAGA base to essentially bludgeon the rest of the Republican Party to follow him. And then he didn't even bother to attend the primaries until later on when it went essentially one-on-one between him and Nikki Haley. And by that time, he becomes convicted and also all the momentum is with him. In fact, it's interesting. Since 2015, Donald Trump is still the most talked about politician in America. Arguably, in the entire world. Right? So, what are the lessons in the Philippines? It's very possible na mukhang laos ang mga Dutertes ngayon. It's very possible na the same way na in 2022 underperformed yung Republicans and wasak yung mga MAGA candidates sa gubernatorial rails in Pennsylvania, whatever. It's very also possible na, Dutertes will look finished next year. But, I think if Dutertes have enough time, by 2026, 2027, palaos na si BBM, lalabas lahat ng mga baho, mga problema, etc., magbi-build up yung grievance, then the Dutertes can come back as victim and champions. We discussed this earlier, but I think it was not emphasized enough that you never it's a political hazard to underestimate populism, because populism always comes back with permutation. We already had that with Erap, then Digong. We can have another Duterte, Sara, maybe Duterte himself. So I'm telling you guys, there should be no room for complacency. Dahil narinig ko lahat ng sinabi na, oh, yung nangyari ngayon, ito yung nangyari noong 2022. Well, BBM didn't turn out actually as the scary guy that many people thought. I'm not saying he's great. A lot of problems we can talk about, essentially, precisely why I think that 2025, 2026, 2027, BBM could be very unpopular. He's already underperforming. So, as I said, the lesson here is, if you're gonna go after Dutertes and then you don't go to its logical conclusion, because that's exactly the failure of the other side, right? Twice sila nag-impeach kay Trump, nag-investigate sila sa January 6, blah, blah, blah. But in the end, Trump was allowed, and Trump went and rebuilt his base and came back even stronger than ever. The strongest comeback in human history. You know? Maybe the Dutertes can even beat that record, right? If they're given that space. So the lesson for Marcos and lesson for opposition and whatever is very clear. Do not underestimate the ability of the Dutertes to make a comeback later on. Even if at this point they look very weak right now, next year pwede pa sila mawasak, electorally speaking. But if they just survive and reconstitute themselves, 2027 could be very different from 2024. In the same way, 2024 is very different from 2022. Parati ko nakikita yan eh. Either sobrang complacent ng tao, ay wala na yan, or sobrang overtakot ng tao, oh my God, they'll be there forever. That's immaturity. That's political immaturity. And mature political critical thinking is this. Don't overestimate any political force, but rather overestimate them than underestimate them, because the cost of underestimating them is way higher than the cost of. But at the very least, if you're really good, you won't overestimate them, but definitely you will not also underestimate them. And I'm saying this, if this happened in US, it can happen everywhere else. In fact, as we speak, lumalakas yung right-wing parties in Europe. Alternative for Deutschland is doing very well in Europe right now. As we speak, all sorts of different right-wing populist groups around the world are gaining momentum and drawing inspiration from what's happening in Donald Trump, political comeback. So, how is the Philippines going to be immune from that? After all, Duterte won in the same year that Trump won and Brexit happened. So there's a lot of interconnectedness in this world. Oh, and by the way, the next year nanalo naman si Bolsonaro, and so on and so forth. So, dapat talaga mag-soul searching talaga mga liberals and opposition and all of that, and voter blaming, especially when you say it openly, that's the last thing you should do. That's the last thing you should do. On that note, thank you very much. Bago kayo magalit pa sa akin lalo, you know one thing that makes me glad is when I go to comments sometimes. Of course, sometimes I check or whatever, but and then I'm beginning to realize that people are seeing what I'm doing here. What I'm doing here is, I'm not here to tell you what you want to hear. I'm not here to pander to you. I see that a lot with a lot of other bloggers. Kadiri, honestly. Tuwag. They're just pandering. Kadiri din kasi parang you're just doing that para lang, alam mo na, di ba? Kaya nga, sobrang syungay mga sabi, oh, Richard is doing it for engagement. Like, get out of here. You know how stressful it is to be bashed by 10 different sides? Believe me, it's not worth it. The few pennies you can get from engagement, it's not worth it. I'm doing it because that's the right thing to do. And I'm willing to be corrected by people from the left, to the right, to the center. But my instinct always was somewhere from the center, making things work. Sometimes you have to lean here, sometimes you have to lean there. Maybe I could be more conservative on certain issues, more progressive on other issues. And that allows me to see things from different sides, to understand why people vote for Trump, why people vote for Duterte, and why people could still end up voting for progressives or Democrats or liberals. But you have to have that self-reflection instead of blaming the voters or attacking people like me. Please, I'm just a normal messenger. All right? Great people, amazing people. Thank you very much. Hindi ko na mabalik yung bitag accent ko. 20 years in journalism. Okay. So tuloy-tuloy lang supportan niyo sa Richard Adarian Productions. Great Productions. Nasira, hindi ko makombine ng Trump and bitag eh. Medyo mahirap yan. But on that note, salamat. Thank you very much. Tuloy-tuloy lang itong discussion nato. We'll try to, I hope I can get Leloy to talk. I hope it's okay. Wherever you are, bro, I hope you're listening. Let's do something about the US elections and make sense out of things. Hopefully once, you're in the right state of mind. And that, let me finally get some rest. Dalawang araw na in and out, dami natin ginagawa. So I hope to get finally some good rest. And then tuloy lang natin itong discussion natin. Alright? Ilang. Simple lang. Yeah. Great.